Okay, 11 Kislev. Every morning we learn, Baruch Hashem, this little group, and with this we fulfill what Chazal say, that Gadol Torah shemevi refuah lekol chai, that great is Torah, because one of the reasons is because it brings healing to all living things. Who needs a healing?
Yehudis Golda Bas Elisa Hana, Chaim Yaakov Zev Ben Sarah, Yosef Yitzhak Ben Lior, Shoshana Bas Hana, Yaakov Shaul Ben Hana Miriam, Gary Robertson of George, Yehudit Gila Bas Rachaleah. That's it.
Refuah Shlema B'Korah to all of them.
Amen. Thank you.
Who else?
Yeah. Sorry, 1 minute. Okay, we go. Thank you. Blah, 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 blah. Ro'i ben Ruchama, Yisrael ben Yamin ben Leah Gittel, Noam Abraham ben Atara, and Sabrina Celestine, daughter of George Leo.
Refuah Shlema B'Korah.
Man.
And Tuvia ben Avram, and Devorah Leah Bas Ahuva Liba.
And Pesach Yosef ben Hinda, Shmuel ben Yocheved, Gittel Bas Sarah. Amen.
Yom Yom. Mm-hmm. Well, this is one of those. At this point in Hebrew, there appears a lot of emendations to the Siddur that have meaning only in the Hebrew original. And in this class, we're not going to open the Siddur and correspond words in the Siddur to the fixings that have been put here. We're going to move on with Tanya. Okay. So, lessons in Tanya for today, bottom of page 345. Yeah, bottom 345. And here, where we are is, where are we? Yeah, on page 316, down from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down from the top. Okay, we are going to take a deep dive today into minutiae of Kabbalistic language. But before we do that, I want to just say the framework for this, the simple understanding of what we're doing, the simple framework is, when you hold on to an esrog, a fruit that's a permissible fruit to eat, that esrog, as a fruit, is totally concealing Elokus. That's called the hislabshus, the enclothement of Elokus, godliness in the Seder of Histalshalis, less and less and less Elokus, godliness revealed, until you get to the physical object. Now, when you take that esrog with the other 3 species, and you put them together, and you make a brucha, you're now transforming that revelation to a direct revelation of God. Why? Because when you do that, you are revealing God's ratzon, God's will, which is his keser, in the physical object. So the same physical object, depending on the situation, is either a manifestation of Seder Histalshalis, which is concealment, or, when it's used for a mitzvah, a manifestation of the Ratzon HaElyon, supreme will of the crown of God.
That's amazing.
That's the topic. Now we're going to invest that topic in all kinds of language. Okay. Now, the reason, right? The reason for what? The reason is we've used here, and this is something that we don't see too much in Chassidus, the word hislabshus, enclothement, used in 2 different ways. One, the way I first described the esrog as a piece of fruit, where the hislabshus means concealment, simsum, covering, and another, hislapshus, which also means invested in a manner of revealing God's will. Okay, so the reason for the difference in the esrog when it's used for a mitzvah from the normal seder histalshalis, the reason is as follows. Now, there's going to be a lot of technical terms here. At the time, the reason for this, that when you take it as a mitzvah, it's outside, it's different from the normal seder histalshalis, is mishum because, here we go, the Chabad de Hasiya, the Chochmah, Bina, and Das of the world of Asiya, the Bechinas Neshama, which is the level of the Chabad of the place, is the Neshama of the place. But when it's in the Seder Histalshalis, we're going to now distinguish between Neshama on the one hand, and Nefesh, Ruach, and Nefesh on the other hand. So when the Chabad of Asiya is in the level of Neshama, Hu Mokar HaChayas, the Chabad, the Nefesh, the Ruach, it's the source of the Chabad of Nefesh and the Ruach. So get this, Chabad, of course, is the first of three triads in the Seder Histalshalis plus Malchus, right? But when it's in this manner that we're speaking about, this is Chabad of the Nefesh and the Ruach. It's Chabad as Chabad becomes the father, the progenitor of the lower levels, Nefesh and Ruach, the Toldoi Seihin and their offspring, this Havuson, and brings them into being. Chabad, as the beginning of a Seder Histalshalis, brings everything into being, Me'ayin L'yesh, from nothing to something, Im Toldoi Seisim, with all of the stuff that's created and all of their offspring, Ad Soifa Asiya, down here to the end of the chain of Seder Histalshalis, which is this earth, the Kol Seva and all its hosts. That's Chabad of Seder Histalshalis. Aval Chabad de Halachas, the same Chabad, but we're going to see there's a difference between the panemius of something and the chitzonius of something. And this is true of everything. Everything has, we each have an inner dimension and an outer expression. This permeates all of reality. There's the inner dimension and the outer dimension. So we've described the outer dimension of Chabad, which is responsible for touching off the whole Seder Histalshalis. Aval Chabad halachas, different. The Chabad of the laws, the Tamehim and their reasons, Sheba Malchus de Bria of Yetzira, which is invested in Malchus of Bria. First is Bria. Bria is the Talmud, and Yetzira is the Mishnah. We're going from bottom to top, right, in inverse relationship. As the Chabad, the wisdom of God now is invested in his, ultimately, halacha, the Talmud and the Mishnah and the Talmud. So inyan hachma hi betiken partzufe de atzilus. So then Chabad is not just the original point of the Seder of Histalshalis, but it's the tikkun of partzufe de atzilus. It's the rectification. Remember, mitzvahs are all about what? To rectify and clarify and transform the darkness into light. So this is Chabad, as it is of the tikkun partzufe of the images of the configuration of Atzilus, Shebahen, which in these partzufim is configurate. A parzuf is a face. That's the simple meaning, but it's called a face because when you look at a face, you don't see left eye, right eye, nostril, left and right. You see an image of a holistic thing called a face. So this face of Atzilus, these partzufim, these faces, beluyin kol tameh mitzvah. In these faces depend all of the reasons, or are hanging. That's the easiest way to. There is hanging all the reasons for the mitzvahs. In the chokhmah, that's associated, that level of chokhmah which is associated with bringing God's ratzon into everything, versus being the first in the stage of Seder Histalshalis. Mitzvahs aseh, of course, are the chasadim, the kindnesses of Hashem. Who mitzvahs loisa say, Behe Gavuras, with the 5 Gavuras. Now, in Shum Hochi, now because of this, because there is this aspect, this, we'll call it, just for simple terms, an inner aspect of Chokhmah. So this inner aspect, as opposed to the aspect of Chokhmah, which is the origin point of Seder Histalshalis, Namikashi Yorda, when it comes down, not to be a source of created beings, but to be a representation of the mitzvahs, Slavish benavoraim, and to be enclosed in creatures, Ein Malchus the Abriya v'Yitzira, whether it's Malchus of Bria, which we said is the Talmud, and Yitzira, which is the Mishnah, which is the Neshama, the Bechinas Neshama, Udavke shehu mekelim de'atzilas. This, that it becomes enclosed this way and becomes the level of, now here we go distinguishing between the level of Neshama and the 2 levels lower than that, which is Ruach and Nefesh. When it becomes down in the level of Neshama, Shehu Mekelim of Atzilus, which the level of Neshama is the vessels of Atzilus, right, the highest worlds. Nefesh Ruach. It's in the level of this Chabad is now the inner dimension of Chokhmah, which is a vehicle for God's will, is in the higher level called Neshama, and not in the lower level called Nefesh and Ruach. After Chabad HaBriya Yitzira, even though Chabad of Bria and Yitzira, the Bechinas Neshama Shegavoa Ma'oid Ma'lason Al Bechinas Malchus de Bria, which of course that their levels, this Chabad of Bria and Yitzira, which is in the level of Neshama, is much, much higher on the level of Malchus of Bria and Yitzira of Neshama, which is at the lower level. Nevertheless, the Chabad of Neshama is a makar l'Chabad de Bria, is a source to the Chabad of the lower worlds. Chachma of Atzilus, the Chabad of the Neshama of Atzilus, is a source to Chabad of Bria and Yitzira. Shabachinas Nefesh and Ruach, which Neshama is the higher point as it develops into the lower points of Nefesh and Ruach. Shehein HaMalachim, which these are the Malachim, but this is describing Seder Histalshalis. That an aspect of Chabad, the more external aspect of Chabad, becomes the engine for the creation starting, at least here, the realization of the first individuation in creation is that Solim, the emanated beings, and the angels. So, like kasha, don't ask, this is not a kasha that we're distinguishing, that even though we're talking about one thing, which is Chokhmah or Chabad, that there are 2 kinds of Chokhmah and 2 kinds of Chabad. The Be'emes, because in truth, Hamalachim v'hanashamas einen ele metipa hanimshechas mechabad the neshama. Because, now we'll talk about, we've often used the mashal, the Alter Rebbe has often used the mashal of Chokhmah as the seminal drop, right? So he says, in truth, the angels and the neshamas, einen ele metipas hanimshechas mechabad, they're only derived from the drop, which is drawn down from Chabad, of the neshama. And that comes down the Yesod Zoh, down into the structure, ultimately the midah of Yesod of Zoh, and is given over to Malchus, in that mashal of the seed seminating the womb, W-O-M-B. From Misham, and from there, Yotzu bebechinas Leda, and from there that gives birth, right? That's the Seder Ahistalshalis. Kiafim Tim Sulema, even if you're going to say, Shenivrohil, that the souls are coming from the Ha'ora of the Kalim, they're only coming from the rays from the Kalim of Nukva, of Malchus, of Atzilus. But as they come down, yes, even though they're coming down from an external place, they become, the externality of one level becomes the internality of the lower level. That's all about how Chabad expresses itself in the first kind of Hislapshus that we spoke about, which is enclosement in the Seder Histalshalis. But that's the externality, okay? So you have the notion of a drop, the seminal drop from Chabad, versus now, which is the essence. Essence Chabad, the essence of Chabad, of the neshama, mispashit, flows out, be'evov kitzaves the zun, in the six directions of the six midos, right? Now the six midos, now we're talking here, right, about the Chabad, right, the atzmas, the essence of where the essence of Chabad flows into the six midos, and the six midos are the Shisha Sidra Mishnah U'Gemara, the six orders of the Mishnah and the Gemara. Bottom line, we're talking about one thing, Chabad, right, the wisdom of the Eibishter, but in two flavors, the flavors that I mentioned that we spoke about yesterday, the words that he used as two kinds of halbasha, two kinds of enclothement. One, the externality enclosed in the Seder HaHestalshalis, which is subject to tzimtzumim, and two, the internality of Chabad, which is the source for the six midos, as they are the six orders of the Mishnah and Halacha. In a sense, I'll tell you, even for myself, because I'm learning this over and over, it's a bit of TMI, meaning too much information, meaning, what do I do with this? We could really, so what? And the answer I have is the simple answer that I started with. That there's a Seder of Chabad on down, which is called Seder Histalshalis, which gives rise to a piece of fruit called an esrog. And then there's a Seder of Hislapshus of the Panemius, the inner dimension, which gives rise to the mitzvah of the esrog. Okay, how do you guys take this, or comment, or questions, or anything?
I'd like to know how this fits into this Kuntres Achron, which is supposed to be harmonizing issues that are outstanding from all the
Okay, it's very simple. These are outstanding issues to a particular kind of people of his congregation. He's writing to his congregation. But who was in his Hillel Paracher, right? Other people like that who had questions. And he's in the application of Kabbalah to the reality that we live in. And he's answering their questions.
Okay, but we don't.
That's the only way I take it.
He doesn't really frame the question here,
Well,
does
he? Sure he does.
What's the question?
We got one word called hislapshus, and it's used in two different meanings. What does that mean?
Oh, all right.
Yeah, that's a simple question.
Okay.
Yeah. We got Chabad, and it's acting in two different ways. One is a source of creation, father and mother, which give offspring, and the other is Torah mitzvahs. How does this work? Some of these people that he's talking to are wondering about that. And that's why he's addressing them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe sometimes there's this distinction between the or that creates and the or that enlivens.
Yeah, that's not this.
That's not here. Okay.
No, that's not here.
Yeah,
you're right. Yeah. I mean, that's important. You got to know where you're holding. This is a very key thing. There's a lot of mistakes come out of people's mouths by not being sensitive to in what context was this said.
Fair enough.
I mean, the classic of this is in the Gemara itself, when you find two totally opposite opinions. We're coming up with one. Hanukkah. Do you start from 1 to 8, or do you go from 8 down? And the resolution of that is both are true. It just depends on from what perspective you're looking at it. Shnehem emes.
So good.
Okay. Anybody else?
So there's a b'chein for you.
Okay. Yeah, there's a b'chein. Exactly. Right. I mean, it's all about it. Think about it. There's 8 candles, 1 candle, right? We've been talking about Esther, but take your Shabbos candle. our Shabbos candle. I mean, as a hislapshus of Chabad in Seder Histalshalos, it's just a piece of wax with a wick. It is. And the godliness, I'm not looking at my candle, I'm nipping, I have it up over there. My candles get from last Shabbos. However, it's a vessel for the expression of godliness when somebody lights it with a bracha, and it becomes devar mitzvah. It becomes totally transformed, and you're sensitive to that. The difference between during the week looking at a candle with wick and wax versus when you stand in front of it and say the bracha. You have a sensitivity to the difference between those two aspects of the same thing. And that's the question he's asked. How is it? How does that work? Two aspects of the same thing. Two kinds of hislapshus. All right. Anybody else? So onward and upward. We'll see you tomorrow. Yemir Hashem. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great.